Hi, this is Diana, and this will be my final presentation for linguistics. The topics that I chose to cover were language myth 8, which are that children can't speak or write properly anymore, and language myth 13, that black children are verbally deprived. Along with the myths and debunking and supporting evidence that I found for those, I will also be using our text in chapters 1, which is our introduction, and chapter 8, which is referring to language acquisition in our language files book that we use in class. So to start out, I'm going to go through the language myths, what they are, how they were debunked, and then kind of tie in the information that we've learned along with articles or videos that I found outside of the classroom. So to start off with, we'll do language myth 8, which is that children can't write or speak properly anymore. And the myth is basically what it says it is, that children cannot write or speak properly anymore. This takes into account, and what we see in the debunking is that anymore would mean that there was a time to where children spoke and wrote perfectly, or to a much better degree than what they do now. And how this myth was debunked was throughout the chapter, they actually looked at finding what they termed a golden age, to where children were speaking or writing more properly or more efficiently than what they are now. And it was pretty easily debunked by the material in the book. A few of the things that it stated was in the 18th and 19th century, that approximately 40% of brides and grooms, couldn't even sign their register. And that circa 1940s, there was a Education Act that was put in. And I guess let me say this as a note too, that this chapter, although I'm carrying it over to the United States, is mostly based in Britain. So the 1944 Education Act, it really, it's talking about getting a baseline literacy in place. But what we saw, other than the 40% of brides and grooms not being able to sign their own marriage register in the 18th and 19th century, is that in the 1950s, there was a nice excerpt from somebody that said that, he knew that some of his classmates, whenever he was in primary school, couldn't read, that they were illiterate. But he was astounded whenever he actually was called to be in service, and almost everybody in his group also were not literate. So, going from there, and also goes, to show these astronomical rises in people going to college, whereas they didn't before, and that without having any evidence of a time to where children, or even it kind of goes into the young adults and adults, that there hasn't historically been a time to where they can say, oh, children in this era were better than children of that era. And it also goes and breaks down that, what they're basing it on is not just language, what their native language or their dialect, or, what they're used to speaking in, but more of English and standard English, to be more exact, is what these things were based off of. And it, going to show that most of this spoken English is in the high, the upper middle to high class population, where money's more prevalent, and things to that nature. So that is how that was debunked, by not, showing that there was a time to where children were necessarily more well-spoken or well-written than what they are now. The second language myth was, I believe it was language myth 13, where black children are verbally deprived. And I know that we touched a little bit about this earlier. It was one of the ones that we had to do for class, but I wanted to tie together two separate language myths and see how they, in some ways, feed off of each other, to make even, I guess, a bigger myth. So in black children are verbally deprived, it's, again, just basically what the title says, is that black children don't have, I guess, as much verbal capacity, or they're not getting as much as what, other children are. It's mainly towards white race, but This can be in any, of the facets. And what the debunking was with that was that, um, it goes through nature, nurture versus, time spent directly speaking with the children because they may be from more impoverished backgrounds and maybe mom and dad have to work. But what it shows is that you really just need any interaction, and that black children can, get that same, verbal competency from their older siblings, their grandparents that they may be around, and just the groups of people that they're around versus having to have one-on-one parent time. It also feeds into one of the things that the first language myth that I spoke about did, in that, when these kids are being tested on their verbal capacities, that they're being tested off of a standard English, which may not be the dialect or the traditional use of the language that they are used to. In this myth, it also goes to show that people that speak Canadian French, if they were tested by means of Parisian French, that there would be similar discrepancies between their capacity as well. So those are the two myths that I chose to use for that.